In 2024, Morocco is Africa's fifth largest economy with inflation down to 5%. Yet 80% of its jobs remain informal, and it ranks as North Africa's most unequal nation. How did a country crushed by war debts become this supposed economic miracle? Is it even real? To understand Morocco's fragile success, we must go back to 1860. After losing the Hispano-Moroccan War, the Treaty of Ouad Ras forced the nation to pay 20 million euro, roughly $4 million. It was a devastating sum that triggered its first major financial crisis. This indemnity wasn't just a penalty, it was a shockwave. The Moroccan treasury was drained overnight. To survive, the state had to raise taxes dramatically on its own people, sparking deep domestic unrest. The economic foundation was fracturing under the weight of foreign demand. By the early 20th century, the crisis worsened. Between 1901 and 1909, Morocco faced an annual trade deficit of 14 million francs. The country was spending far more than it earned. Desperation set in, while European bankers waited patiently in the shadows. In 1901, Morocco took a loan of 5 million francs from French banks. Just 3 years later, in 1904, they borrowed a staggering 5 million francs. This wasn't just borrowing. It was a slow surrender of sovereignty, creating a debt dependency that would alter their history. Why did European powers want Morocco so deeply in debt? Was it simply about profit? Or was there a darker geopolitical game being played? The answer lies in how debt became the perfect Trojan horse for colonial domination, disguised as financial assistance. The debt trap worked flawlessly. Creditors demanded control over customs, revenues, and state finances. Morocco wasn't just broke, it was effectively managed by European accountants. This pattern of debt-driven vulnerability set a template that Morocco would spend the next century trying to escape. This wasn't merely a historical accident. It was a structural curse that would echo across generations. When a nation loses control of its purse strings, it loses its future. Morocco's sovereignty was slipping away, one loan payment at a time, into total dependency. Then something unexpected happened in 1956 that gave Morocco a second chance. Independence arrived. The question was no longer about survival under colonial rule. The question became, would they waste this hard-won freedom, or could they rebuild a shattered economy from scratch? The legacy of 1860 and 1904 would haunt them. Escaping the debt trap required painful sacrifices and massive strategic bets. Could Morocco truly break the cycle, or would the ghosts of foreign debt return to claim their modern economic miracle? The foundation was already cracking. In 1956, Morocco won its independence, but inherited an economy shaped by decades of colonial rule. Sultan Mohammed V faced a daunting challenge, building modern institutions and pursuing economic modernization from a very limited starting point. The stakes could not have been higher. The mandate for modernization was clear. Throughout the 1960s, Morocco aggressively invested in infrastructure, pushing GDP per capita up by 47%. But was this growth sustainable, or merely a fragile rebound from a devastated baseline? The 1970s delivered an unexpected windfall. Morocco is the world's third-largest producer of phosphates, and a global price boom fueled an explosive 274% surge in GDP per capita. State-led investments transformed cities and expanded industry. The phosphate boom masked a fatal vulnerability. Agriculture still employed over a quarter of the population, so when relentless drought cycles hit, the entire economy shuddered. By the 1980s, growth collapsed to just 8.2%. The situation deteriorated further. Plunging commodity prices and rising debt forced Morocco to the brink of default. The government had no choice but to accept harsh IMF-backed reforms, trading sovereignty over economic policy for financial survival. These structural reforms meant aggressive privatization, sweeping trade liberalization, and strict fiscal discipline. Public assets were rapidly sold off, subsidies slashed, and budgets tightened. It was bitter medicine for a population already struggling with shrinking incomes and rising inequality. The 1990s saw economic growth stagnate at a meager 9%. The IMF-backed reforms demanded strict fiscal discipline, but the social cost was undeniable. Was this painful austerity the right path forward, or did it sacrifice a generation's prosperity? Share your thoughts below. Despite the pain, a political shift arrived in 1998. Prime Minister Abdurrahman Youssoufi led the first opposition coalition government, advancing both political and economic liberalization. This historic transition finally brought stability and set the stage for the 21st century. Youssoufi's government firmly consolidated the IMF reforms, proving they weren't just temporary emergency measures. They were a permanent national strategy. Morocco was fundamentally restructuring its economy, moving away from volatile state monopolies toward a more open, globally competitive market system. The reforms were undeniably painful, and overall economic growth had completely stalled. But Morocco wasn't just blindly cutting budgets to survive. It was quietly placing strategic bets on specific industries. These targeted investments would transform its entire economy within 2 decades. Morocco holds vast phosphate reserves. As the third largest producer globally, behind the United States and China, this mineral is the backbone of global fertilizer. It gives Morocco significant leverage over food production worldwide, turning dirt into economic power. What do you think? Should one country have that much control over the world's food supply? But phosphate wealth is a double-edged sword. When global fertilizer prices surge, Morocco reaps windfall revenues that fund infrastructure and social programs. When prices collapse, the budget suffers. This single commodity became Morocco's most powerful economic lever and its most unpredictable source of national income. By the 21st century, Morocco made a bet that stunned economists. It became Africa's leading automotive manufacturing hub. Foreign car makers poured in, lured by tax incentives and a location just a short distance from Europe. Massive plants were built, exporting vehicles across the Mediterranean, not just cars. Morocco attracted numerous aerospace companies, manufacturing components for global aviation giants. A country once known for phosphates now builds airplane wiring systems and structural parts. The kingdom transformed itself into an industrial powerhouse, proving Africa could compete in advanced manufacturing. Tourism became Morocco's third strategic pillar. Millions of visitors flocked to Marrakech, Fez, and Casablanca every year, generating billions in foreign exchange. After the pandemic crushed arrivals in 2020, tourism rebounded fiercely. By 2023, it injected desperately needed currency into an economy still dependent on imports. Behind this transformation stood King Mohammed VI, who ascended the throne in 1999. He poured billions into ports and highways to connect the kingdom. The king bet that world-class infrastructure would make Morocco impossible to ignore for global investors seeking new manufacturing hubs. When the Arab Spring erupted in 2011, every neighboring nation trembled. Morocco did something remarkable. King Mohammed VI preempted revolution by drafting a new constitution, devolving powers to an elected parliament. While other nations faced severe instability, Morocco remained stable. The reforms worked, and investors noticed immediately. Morocco chose a radical path: integration over protectionism. It signed multiple free trade agreements with global partners. Tariffs fell. Markets opened. Local industries faced fierce competition, but Moroccan manufacturers adapted or closed. This exposure forced efficiency and exports surged. But what about the workers left behind? By 2023, real GDP growth rebounded to 3.4%, driven by tourism, manufacturing exports, and private consumption. Inflation plummeted from a peak of 1% to just 1.5%. The numbers looked spectacular. But was this resilience real or just a mirage built on borrowed time? These strategic bets seem to be paying off handsomely. Phosphates, cars, planes, and tourists flooded the economy with revenue. But the real test was coming. In 2022 and 2023, global inflation, drought, and energy shocks hit Morocco simultaneously. Would the kingdom's economic model survive the pressure or finally crack apart? In 2023, Morocco's real GDP growth rebounded to a solid 3.4%. This recovery was driven by tourism, manufacturing exports, and private consumption. Projections point to 3.2% in 2024, climbing to 3.9% by 2025. On paper, this looks like a textbook success story. But how deep does this stability run? Inflation collapsed from a peak of 1% in early 2023 to just 1.5% in 2024. Falling food prices drove this drop. Responding to this, the central bank cut interest rates from 3.0% to 2.75% in June 2024. The fiscal consolidation was equally impressive. The budget deficit dropped from 5.2% of GDP in 2022 to 4.7% in 2023. Public debt, sitting at 69.5%, is projected to decline to 68.2% by 2025. These numbers are undeniably strong, but they only tell half the story. Morocco's current account deficit narrowed to a razor-thin 0.6% of GDP in 2023. This was the lowest level since 2007, bolstered by tourism and export growth. Prime Minister Aziz Akhanouch, in power since 2021, focused heavily on investment attraction and maintaining this macroeconomic stability. Yet behind these macroeconomic numbers lies a reality that statistics simply don't capture. Agriculture employs 26.6% of the population, but accounts for only 11.1% of GDP. This disparity highlights a severe vulnerability to drought. To understand fragile economies, consider subscribing. The cracks continue to widen. The youth unemployment rate hit 21.9% in 2025. Even worse, about 80% of all jobs are informal, leaving millions without social protection. Income gaps remain exceptionally high, creating a deeply fractured society beneath the surface of economic triumph. How can a country with such strong GDP numbers leave so many behind? In 2022, Morocco ranked 120th out of 191 countries on the Human Development Index, lagging behind Algeria and Tunisia. Oxfam even labeled it the most unequal country in North Africa. The miracle is leaving people behind. Morocco is the world's third largest producer of phosphates, trailing only the United States and China. This makes global phosphate price fluctuations a major economic factor. When prices drop, the economy feels the shock immediately. The country's reliance on this single resource is a significant risk. This vulnerability is not new. Back in 1860, the Treaty of Wad Ras forced Morocco to pay a massive war indemnity of €20 million. Early 20th century trade deficits and European loans further crippled the nation. The modern macroeconomic stability masks centuries of painful debt management. On paper, Morocco looks like a textbook success story. But behind these macroeconomic numbers lies a reality that the statistics don't capture. The foundation is cracking, and the next drought might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. What happens when the rains fail? This is the paradox of the Moroccan miracle. A nation can boast strong macroeconomic indicators while leaving its own people behind. The wealth generated by growth often fails to trickle down to the communities that need it most, widening the gap between promise and reality. The answer lies in a deeply fractured society. Oxfam officially labels Morocco the most unequal country in North Africa. The celebrated economic miracle disproportionately benefits wealthy elites and foreign investors. Meanwhile, millions of ordinary citizens struggle to survive on the margins daily. If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping our world, subscribe for more eye-opening insights. This inequality is further compounded by a massive shadow economy. Currently, 80% of all jobs in Morocco are entirely informal. This means the vast majority of workers have absolutely no social protection, no legal contracts, and no financial security if crisis strikes. The youth are bearing the heavy brunt of this systemic failure. Despite decades of painful reforms and aggressive privatization, youth unemployment hit 21.9% in 2025. Labor force participation remains stubbornly low, creating a lost generation desperate for opportunities that simply do not exist. Why does a strategically located nation with booming exports fail to generate formal employment? The structural bottlenecks are suffocating, but the economic fragility does not stop at the labor market. Morocco is also locked in a geopolitical stalemate that heavily taxes its regional integration ambitions. The decades-long Western Sahara conflict continues to drain national resources and deter potential investors. Furthermore, the closed land border with Algeria since 1994 imposes massive economic costs. It severely limits trade routes, isolating the Maghreb region and forcing Morocco to look overseas for its survival. These structural cracks are widening every single year, threatening the very foundation of this economic miracle. To understand how nations build wealth on fragile foundations, subscribe for the next episode on the climate threat facing this economy. We are looking at a nation that engineered Africa's most resilient macroeconomic fortress, yet forgot to build doors for its own people. The debt is managed, and the exports are booming, but the social fabric is tearing apart under the weight of extreme inequality. The inequality is truly staggering. The informal sector is swallowing the workforce, and geopolitical isolation limits growth. But an even bigger threat looms on the horizon, one that could make these existing problems significantly worse overnight. And it comes from something Morocco absolutely cannot control. Despite all the industrial bets and IMF reforms, the kingdom remains at the mercy of the elements. The ultimate test of this economic miracle will not come from global markets, but from the rain. Consider this paradox. Agriculture employs 26.6% of Morocco's workforce, yet generates barely 11.1% of GDP. That gap means millions of farmers produce almost nothing of measurable economic value. One drought, and their livelihoods simply vanish into the cracked earth. Morocco's entire growth model is structurally tethered to rainfall. Drought years drag GDP down sharply, while good years artificially inflate it. This relentless volatility makes long-term planning nearly impossible. How do you build factories when your economy swings with the clouds? The government hasn't stood still. It invested massively in irrigation networks and renewable energy projects. These are genuine, impressive achievements that showcase real infrastructural progress. But they address the symptoms: not the structural disease underneath the surface. Because beneath the macroeconomic success lies a fracture few acknowledge. Morocco ranks 120th on the Human Development Index, trailing behind both Algeria and Tunisia. Oxfam calls it the most unequal country in all of North Africa. Youth unemployment sits at 21.9%. Meanwhile, 80% of all jobs exist entirely in the informal economy. These aren't footnotes in Morocco's economic story, they are the story. Growth that never reaches the shadows isn't resilience, but a fragile facade. So here is the unvarnished truth. Morocco's miracle is real. It escaped the debt trap that strangled it since 1860. It built genuine macroeconomic resilience through painful reforms and disciplined fiscal management. But the miracle remains dangerously incomplete. Until inequality shrinks, until the informal economy formalizes, until agriculture stops depending on unpredictable rainfall, the foundation stays cracked. Morocco has proven it can survive devastating crises. But the unanswered question is whether it can finally share prosperity with its people. The real question isn't whether Morocco can grow. It has grown spectacularly. The question is whether that growth can finally reach the 80% working in the shadows. Because a miracle that leaves most people behind isn't a miracle at all. Morocco's story isn't over. The next decade will determine whether this quiet miracle becomes a model for Africa, or it could become a cautionary tale of growth without shared prosperity. The foundation is built. The cracks are visible. What comes next is everything. Morocco's economic century offers profound lessons on resilience and fragility. If this journey changed your perspective, watch the next episode to see how another country turned colonial ruin into a powerhouse. The story of how nations rebuild continues.